Hello, everyone. Welcome to the official ScaleupStream podcast. I am your host, Youssef, and joining us today is Dana Robinson, pitch coach and trainer at Pitch for Impact and board member at E8 Angels. Dana, it's a pleasure having you on the show today.
Hi, Hugh. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, yeah. We're excited to have you on. I think we should dive in. I'm super excited to have this conversation. It's been a long time coming, but I'm excited to have you here. So, Dana, let's just start with a quick intro of your bio, what got you to this place, and just that your entire transition into the venture capital space and everything you're doing right now with training startups and helping raise equity. We'd love to hear the whole story.
Sure, Hugh. So I became a pitch coach kind of by accident. It evolved from my past experience. I've been doing training and presentation skills for many years, over 2 decades. And then I became an investor with an angel group, E8 Angels. And I would watch the pitches and think, oh, wow, if they just had a little bit of training on their delivery, that could be so much better. Or if we worked on clarifying that message, it could be so much more memorable. So I started working with entrepreneurs that I had invested in just to help them with their next round, and that went well. And then became a pitch coach to companies that were going to pitch when they needed some work beforehand, so that it was just more clear to our audience. And then it evolved into a business. So it's been a wonderful transition. I really launched it during COVID when people were having to do online pitches, and it was a struggle. You could tell that a lot when people have a pitch or a meeting in person, it's a lot easier to connect to the audience and to have some conversation. But when it's online, they were just not looking good. So I started doing a lot more, and I put it into a training program that's like a presentation skills program. So it's chunked into modules, so it's easier to learn it over Zoom or any online platform. And so that has worked well, and it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. So let's stick with that point there. This transition, right? Things used to be physical. You could see the investor. You have to fly into town or whatever it may be to give that pitch. Now everything's online. What has been some of the major issues startups have been facing with this new era of just doing things online versus physically?
Well, there's pros and there's cons, and there are a lot of benefits to it, but the hard part is that when you're giving a pitch online and it's a virtual setting, whether you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes or it's a 1-hour meeting, so there's more of a conversation, it's so much easier for your listeners to get distracted in an online meeting, right? Their phone might be buzzing. If they get bored in the pitch, they can start checking email. Like there's just the number of distractions just is exponential compared to an in-person pitch where you can look at people. So it's important to make the message more concise so that people understand right away what you're talking about. It's like, okay, this is interesting to me. I'll pay attention. Because once they get confused or once they get lost or lose interest, it's really hard to bring them back. So that's the most important thing, is that to really make that message more clear and concise to adapt it to online.
Yeah, there's this thing of attention grabbing, similar to like an elevator pitch and things along those lines, very snappy and gets to the point. But how does one go about even putting something like that together? What are important points to have in, your elevator pitch or just your general 7-10 minute pitch to keep investors, interested in what's happening?
I think that the most important thing is to start by thinking of your audience.
Okay.
What is it that you want them to remember? And make that part really clear. So if you know that you're speaking to investors who invest in technology, or maybe they invest in clean tech, so they're a very specific mission, whatever that is, think about what do they want to hear. And rather than try to fill the pitch with all this information that you're excited about on product development and background of the team and everything else that you love to say, really hone in on what do you want them to remember. A week later, when they're looking at your email or calendar invite and thinking, do I want to go to that follow-up meeting? What do you want them to be thinking about? You want them to remember what you do and why they like you. And it's so easy to, after a couple days, to forget what was in a pitch, particularly if it had a lot of information in it. So if people make sure that that first minute or two is really clear on, here's what we do, here's why investors are interested in us, make that memorable, then you've solved the biggest hurdle.
Right.
Because, investors hear a lot of pitches, and it's, after a couple days, when you're thinking back, who did I meet last week? It's hard to remember what was in all of them. And so making it memorable is the biggest hurdle. So I'd say brainstorm. Mm-hmm. And the most important thing about brainstorming is don't turn on your computer. Break out some paper or stand at a whiteboard and get the colors out, colored markers or colored pens, and brainstorm on who's your audience, what do they want to hear, and what are the high-level messages that we have to make absolutely clear, and put that information in the beginning.
Yeah, you said something earlier that stuck out to me, because we see so often the founder gets so stuck on the product and this product is so cool, or even the cause. You mentioned climate tech not long ago, but with climate tech or those that are in spaces that are meaningful. I mean, all spaces have their own meaning, but with climate, you're trying to save the earth and make the world a better place. Typically, things along those lines, and it's like, this is why we need to save the earth, and it's sad to say, but a lot of investors want to know, how are we making money here?
Absolutely.
What's the rate of return? Like, what's happening? So I'm sure you come across that often, because at E8 Element, your thesis is within the climate tech and spaces like that. What are things that could be refined by founders to really stick to the point, to really stick to, this is how we're making money and this is how you're going to get your return in this investment?
Yes, I see a lot of pitches that go off track. And in fact, one of the reasons at E8 Angels that we started giving pitch coaching to everybody that comes, before the member meeting, is years ago we had pitches where they spent most of the pitch talking about the dangers of climate change, and they only got to their product like at the end. So it's like, okay, you know your investor. If you know that they understand the problem, you need to focus on how you're solving it and how, as you grow, this is the impact that you're going to make. So whatever your business is, really focus on what those investors want to know. And I mean, thankfully, you could do an online search and come up with some templates on what goes into a pitch. But even before you start making slides, think about, before that problem or solution or market slide, what do they want to know? And how can I show that investors should be interested in this? Maybe it's that you have traction, that you've got some sales already, or maybe you don't have sales, but you have letters of intent that as soon as the product's ready, these are your customers. Something to show that product market fit and who your customer is.
Even like having a patent. It's so interesting how often all of the intricate details are missing during the pitch. Oh yeah, by the way, we're making $1 million annually, huh? Well, you didn't mention that before.
Exactly. And I've done that in a pitch coaching where I'm listening to the pitch and we're talking about what goes where, and we're towards the end and they talk about this, huge order that they've got. I'm like, hang on, you need to put that in the introduction. You need to tell us
Let's start there, right?
Yeah.
No, that's funny.
I think having a well-rehearsed elevator pitch is a great way to start any pitch. Mm-hmm. And that means that at the very beginnings, talk about what you do, and then something that really explains it. Perhaps you say how your customers benefit, or say that you have orders, or that you have traction, or the market opportunity, whatever it is that's going to really get investors' attention. So besides what you do, 2 or 3 things, they're like, okay, this is the most important thing that I want them to remember a week later when they're invited to the follow-up meeting.
Yeah. So Dana, I know you're more so focused on startups between that pre-seed to the Series A range. What are things that founders should be focused on at the pre-seed stage while getting ready to raise equity? Let's say they don't even have a MVP yet, right? What are things to really focus on that may entice investors to write a check?
I think it's really important that even if they're pre-revenue, that they show that they know their customer and they know how to reach them. So having some evidence of product market fit is very important, right? We want to see that there's a market for whatever you've created. There's a need for it, so that when you launch, there's a ready market that's like, oh, you're solving a pain point and people are going to want this product. It's not just a great idea. It's actually solving somebody's pain point, and here's how we're going to reach them. It's very easy for particularly entrepreneurs with a technology background to be thinking in marketing speak, but it's so important that they're very clear. Okay, this might be an amazing invention, but who is going to buy it and why? Mm-hmm. So I think they need to be really focused on that if they're going to get any investors interested.
Now, as you mentioned, those who are more technical may have issues at communicating the startup and what the vision is. Now, I'm assuming then, would you say is a recommendation of yours for technical founders to seek co-founders that are more so on the entrepreneur communication side of things, that are not so technical but knows how to sell, or is that not too important at that Series A pre-seed stage? Like, what are your thoughts on all of that when it comes to partnerships?
That's really hard to say, and it depends. I mean, some entrepreneurs with a technical background, and I've seen some of this where somebody has a PhD in something very specific. They start their business and they learn. They're coachable. They surround themselves with advisors, and they want to understand the business side. And they're good at communicating. So, these are all skills that require learning and
right.
training. So as long as they're willing to learn that, then maybe they can do both sides. But if they absolutely hate it, they either have to get some training and advice and plow through, or put that as part of their team. And sometimes it's obvious on if the team is going to need to fill this hole. One thing that I notice in often or very early stage pitch decks is that you look at the use of funds and it'll have this pie chart, and it'll almost all the money is going for product and development. And there's this tiny sliver for marketing, and that they say next year they're going to raise $1 million, they're going to have $1 million in revenue. It's like, wait a minute, how are you going to get $1 million in revenue with no marketing? So it's a complete myth that if you build it, they will come.
You
right?
know,
so they need to bring in either, hire somebody with that marketing experience or learn it. But so it's often very obvious at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Do they need to round out the team with someone else?
Yeah, that's hilarious. I think oftentimes, and I may be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but oftentimes when we're starting off, we're placing product and things like marketing and sales on two different spectrum. But what I've come to realize is that just from years being in business, they're sort of in the same on the same side, of the spectrum, because as the product gets better and we're marketing the product, we're getting more client acquisitions, and it continues to spin like that. The product continues to get better. We're bringing in more money. We're working on the product. We're marketing features and all of these various things, and we're handling the customer service and all of that, and it continues to just climb up. But just focusing on the product itself only, but not getting more clients in, not getting feedback, not getting any sort of traction, it seems like inertia starts to kick in, and things are just not looking too pretty. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Would you agree with that statement, or are you on a different spectrum of that?
No, I absolutely agree. Developing a product, it's so important that it's created with the end user in mind. And that's why people do beta testing. When they say we're launching our pilot or we're doing our beta test now, they're getting that feedback on what's working, what needs to change, what do people like, what are people not using, and often it's a huge surprise. So yes, as product is developed, there needs to be a lot of customer feedback.
Now, I've been wanting to ask you this question for some time now. What would be your idea of the perfect pitch deck? If there were a thing, what would be close to that? The perfect pitch deck.
I think the perfect pitch deck, and there is no perfect,
right?
And I tell people, don't try to be perfect, because
right.
If you try to be perfect, you will never finish. Mm-hmm. But a great pitch deck is very concise. You can look at it and go, oh, I get it. And you don't get confused with lots of other details. And it also, I'm going to say great instead of perfect, because it's never perfect.
Right,
a great deck supports a good delivery, because I think delivery is just as important in a pitch as content, because investors don't invest in decks. Right. They invest in entrepreneurs who show capability and commitment and passion, and that they're coachable and learning. So to show this, you need to be able to deliver your pitch with looking at the audience and making it feel like a conversation and showing your personality. And you can't do that if you're reading really complicated, busy slides. So I think a great deck should support the message. So if the entrepreneur needs to give the pitch without a deck because of a technical problem, that's fine. They have the information in front of them. They have a great outline. They speak with that, and then it turns into a conversation at the end. And then if they can use slides, the slides support that message. So people can look at the slide and go, oh, that makes sense, because this is what they just said. So I like the slides to be very concise and uncluttered, but that the focus goes on creating the message that's audience focused and really clear and memorable.
Now, what are typical things that you may assess in a founder that is looking to work with you? What do you typically start with in terms of their persona or their decks, or like what factors are you looking for to see where to start in terms of your coaching and guidance through the whole fundraising journey?
Well, when I start working with an entrepreneur, I really focus it on what they need. Some people have the great message and they've been through an accelerator, or they're about to go through one, so they know it's going to be changed a lot in the next few months, but their delivery is very flat. So on that one, we'll focus more. It'll be like presentation skills with a focus towards that your audience is an investor. Most of the time, when an entrepreneur comes to me and they want help, they're very muddled in what the message should be. And they're not confident in, am I saying the right thing? Is my message landing? People don't seem to get it. So we will focus on message, but I don't look at deck right away. We do brainstorming. So the first session, we do lots of brainstorming on who's your audience? What do you want them to remember? What's most important to them? And then we brainstorm on the high level messages. What's your problem or pain point that you're solving? What's your solution? Tell me about this market. Why is it ripe for disruption? Who's your customer? Like, show that you know them, explain them. And what's your product, and how do people benefit from it? So I don't dig into features at all. We talk about benefits. And then with those kind of high level messages, then we put it into order on what should go into pitch deck. So that the pitch flows like a story and it makes sense, because what we don't want is for it to be choppy and for people to get confused. So we want it to start with the high level important messages, what we want them to remember, and then we explain those as we go, and it wraps up with with making it even more clear. After they have this great outline of this is how my story is, I mean, whether it's on paper or whiteboard or Post-it notes all the way across the room, I want them to be really clear on everything you need to say. Then we look at the deck and make sure that the deck supports each of those. Oftentimes, the slide deck needs to be completely start over. Most of the time, most of the slides work. We just rearrange it and make some new ones here and there. But
Okay.
I always look at big picture before the details.
Right. So kind of like an inversion type of approach. I like that. I think the storytelling side of things it's an art, and it could be forgotten as well, or not even understood as to why it's important, especially at that pre-seed up to like Series A stage, where you're maybe connecting with a lot of angels and who are interested in impact, obviously ROI as well. But now you have to really have a solid story, but you're coming in the game without one. And it's can you imagine raising equity? You don't even have a product yet, and not even having a story.
You better have a good story if you don't have a product yet.
Yeah.
And I think, and yes, it's an art form, but it's also a skill.
Yeah.
So communicating and pitching and storytelling, those are skills that can be learned. Mm-hmm. And so I emphasize that in the beginning of don't be discouraged. If you haven't learned this before, you can.
Yeah.
Everybody can get better.
100%.
At communications.
Especially with a coach that is there.
Especially with a coach.
It makes everything a lot more streamlined and simple, having someone to just help you, mentor you through the process.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like learning a sport. If you and I decided to play tennis, Hugh, we could go hit the ball around, and after a few months of playing every weekend, we might get better. But gosh, if we had a coach to tell us exactly what we're doing wrong and how to improve and work on skills one at a time to progressively improve, might get pretty good.
Yeah, here I am being a hypocrite. I should have gotten a coach for golf. I just went out there and I've just been doing my own thing for over a year now, almost 2 years. And oh my goodness, I'm struggling to unlearn the bad things. So, when you learn something the wrong way, it's tough unlearning those bad tendencies. Right?
Yes, it really is. I've had to help people unlearn some bad habits as well.
That's tough.
Which is why I always start at the basics.
Yeah.
On messaging and then on the delivery skills, like to really just practice them one at a time and let go of some bad habits.
But yeah, hopefully I'll get a coach pretty soon here and correct the wrongdoings and take it from there. I want to be good, man, but when you're learning by yourself is tough.
Exactly. And it's the same with pitching. You can do a lot of research online, but if you're doing it yourself, it's hard. It's hard to do even with help because you're doing something really big and scary.
Yeah.
And so, I give lots of credit to entrepreneurs with the nerve to stand up and pitch.
Yeah.
Because it's not an easy thing and it can be nerve-wracking. So I also spend a lot of time on how to overcome nerves, because even if somebody says, oh, I know the content really well, I'm fine. Man, when you're nervous, it's really hard to stay focused. So there's some great tools out there to stay on message and keep the delivery at a good pace, even if you're absolutely terrified. So when people say, I hate pitching and I hate presenting because I'm scared, I say, don't let it stop you.
Yeah.
Everybody can still overcome this, even if they're nervous, because it's natural to be nervous. It shows you care. So now we just have to know how to carry on anyway and still be good.
I think that's a good factor right there that you just mentioned, the nerve, right? Oh my goodness. What is it? More people are fearful of presenting public speech than they are to die. Statistically, now that just shows something right there. Wow, we could have a conversation on that all by itself. Right.
We could. I'm thinking of making a webinar on overcoming nerves or feel the fear and speak up anyway, because you have something to say.
Oh, yeah.
So you should learn how to overcome those fears and speak up.
I've been doing this podcast for not so long, but I've been doing podcasting and I still have times where I'm nervous and it's like, dude, are you serious? I mean, you're not even physically in front of this person, and it's a one-on-one type of thing. Why are you nervous? So it's like this nerve thing is something we can't escape, right? It's like it's there. It's just learning how to tolerate and deal with our nerves and how to make things happen regardless of how we're feeling in that moment.
Yes.
Right? So
there's great tools and methods to even if you're absolutely terrified, to still do a good job.
100%.
So when I see people are nervous, I think, oh, I wish they would have practiced with me. I could help them.
You see, you not only are you empathetic, and I've noticed that through our conversations, but also the fact that you are an investor and you are on the other side, mixing that empathy in with just being able to have conversations with founders that are looking to raise equity is just so valuable, right? And honestly, for those who are listening, definitely you want to reach out to Dana, and we're going to leave your details in the bio here as well. But Dana, do you have any? I know you're really busy and you have a lot on your plate. Do you have any finishing remarks for our community as we're closing up here?
I'd say that the most important thing is if you need to give a pitch, not to get so hung up on all the details, but really focus on what an investor should know and what do you want them to remember a week later when you invite them to a meeting. Because, we're people too. We get overwhelmed with too much information. So do us a favor and keep the message nice and concise and clear, and we'll dig into the details later. Awesome.
Well, Dana,
it should hopefully make your life easier.
I agree. I 100% agree. I guess before we close up, what has been your experience with the ScaleupStream platform, and what's going on as far as giving opportunities to both investors to see deal flow, but also for those who are looking to raise equity?
Yeah, I think it's a great platform for investors and entrepreneurs to find each other, and any platform that's out there that helps people to connect is great, because investors, they tend to have their interest, whether it's their mission or whether they've clarified their thesis or not. People have their things that they're most interested in, and it's wonderful to have different ways to find that.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us here at the ScaleupStream podcast. Looking forward to future recordings. I can see you coming back on the show and having another conversation, because there's so much more to tap into and, uncover for the community. And I think you'd be an awesome person to have some of those conversations with.
It's always a pleasure to chat with you, Hugh. I hope we can do it again soon.